Good evening to you all and welcome to our event. Many thanks for coming along today and welcome to the launch of I Am Not What Is Broken. So this is an effort on the part of myself, Javayria Masood, hello, hi, and William Barrow, who's at the back, but he doesn't really want you to look at him today. So if there are any shortcomings or areas for improvement with what we're doing, just let us know and provide feedback. Just to add a caveat, we're not funded and we are independent of any organisation or professional body. So this is purely done by me and Will and under the kind of umbrella of Light Inc., which I'll explain more about later. So I Am Not What Is Broken attempts to bring together stories in written and visual form from people who identify as coming from Black, South Asian and Muslim diasporas. So we have a website link, which is right there, you can see it. On this website we have 7 written contributions by people from these backgrounds who have shared their stories relating to mental health, how they manage their conditions, what's helped them and what they hope for in the future. After this event, we're also going to post 4 videos of people who have agreed to have their stories filmed and put on our website. So, why the name I'm Not What Is Broken? Well, we wanted to shift the conversation away from there's something wrong with me, that's why I have this challenge in my life. We want to acknowledge that structures of domination, neoliberalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, heteronormativity, and the sheer pace of modernity and the technological revolution, namely social media and the movement to an image-based way of consuming information, does affect our state and our well-being. We also want to present the idea that managing mental health challenges on a daily basis are victories in the face of multiple challenges we have to negotiate all the time. So why have we set this project up? I'll give you some background about myself. Well, in short, I've struggled myself with depression and anxiety, and in my early 20s, I experienced quite a lot of suicidal thoughts. William has also experienced these challenges. He's dealt with physical and emotional abuse, and as a result, experienced depression and suicidal thoughts. Some of the things which led to make me feel so terrible were overt racism, overt Islamophobia towards my family, abuse post 9/11, being called the P word, being called dirty, being told I smelled like curry at school. I grew up in a majority white area in which I clearly was something strange, I was alien, I was undesirable, and I was definitely odd. So I started rebelling to numb my feelings of difference and otherness, and I just started doing all kinds of things, just to numb the pain and just to feel like I was real and human. I've also got polycystic ovary syndrome, which meant that at a young age I experienced hair growth on my face, so I'd get called smelly P word and a boy. So it just completely added to my confusion of so I'm not wanted on any level really. And I'm also suspected as a Muslim. 9/11 happened when I was 12, so I was part of that generation that grew up in it. I was criticised by my family as well and the external world. I got to a point where it seemed pointless to want to live here or exist somewhere where I wasn't valid or seen as human. So both Will and I have been on a journey of trying to heal and deal with our challenges on a daily basis, and we're trying to deal with the fact that we're married, which is it's also like fun. So these experiences led William and I to discuss what helped us on our journeys of healing. We both agreed, knowing we were not alone in our struggles, and hearing how people dealt with their challenges, and hearing that people actually could function in a world and manage these things gave us a lot of hope. So we decided to create a small place where people can access written and visual stories and begin to have some of these conversations we were having at home, not just in private but in public. So before I go on, I just want to comment on language. So we realised that our words in some ways are inadequate and not enough. Diaspora, Black, South Asian, these are all really broad terms and we know in many ways they're problematic. They don't capture the nuances of our experiences and our lived realities. We are aware there are many diasporas and different experiences within diasporas. For example, we are conscious that we have not included the experiences of people who are from the Arab or Southeast Asian diasporas. We also have not explicitly outlined people from any other religious group. This is mainly because the stories we collected were from our personal circles. If anyone wants to add your contribution, we'd be happy to talk to you and add your experiences on the website. Also, the term mental health is broad. We could be referring to depression, psychosis, PTSD, low mood, a whole host of other different types of mental health conditions. We understand that each condition has a set of responses which are relevant to it. We don't want to diminish therapy or professional services or medication as a part of that healing process, or suggest that one approach is an answer. Some of the questions and points of discussion that we want to raise today is, and I'll start one, there's many, so. What does healing mean? Do we view it as a process which happens between two fixed points, i.e. where there's a beginning and healing starts, and where there's an end where healing finishes? Or should we look at it as an ongoing process? What does healing the self look like when the self is inextricably linked to external structures of domination, which I mentioned above? And how do we navigate this as individuals and a community of people? Does therapy really address these structures of domination? Does it? We don't. We'll find out. We also want to deconstruct the notion of professionalism and expertise. Formalised services are important, but what does it mean to heal me every day? Can healing be accessible as well? And finally, penultimate point, can we practice, as Bell Hooks says, radical love and openness, or as Cornel West says, can we be radical truth tellers? What is the role of being open about experiences in communities, being vulnerable with others and telling truths for healing? And lastly, how does storytelling act as a healing mechanism? Hopefully we can get to dissecting some of these points in our panel and audience discussion. I realise I just threw a lot at you, so just loads of thoughts. So in terms of the outline of the evening, we are going to have some videos from those who wanted to share their stories through film. We're going to have some poetry. Can't have an event without poetry. Alright. 2 musical performances. Yeah, don't want to just talk at you. A panel discussion, and then usually Q&As are really short, right? We want to do a bit of a longer one so people can just like chat and ask questions. So like 30 minutes or so. Really get into it. And that's all from me. Thank you. Right, now the program begins. We have Sanah. Sanah's going to come up and do some poetry, so I'm just going to read her bio out. I can't see her. So now we've got a poetry performance performed by Sanah Ahsan, who is a trainee clinical psychologist, spoken word poet and activist. Her performance journey began with BBC Words First, and her poetry is currently part of an exhibition in the National Poetry Library. If you want to catch it, that's a plug. Yeah. So I'd like to welcome Sanah up.
Hi everyone. I'm going to do it with the mic. I'll just stand up and talk to you all. So I've got 3 poems to share with you today. The first one, I've tried to kind of capture a bit about the power of vulnerability and the importance of being real with your struggle and your mental health issues. Come as you are, my dear. Come with all that wear and tear, all that messiness that you can't bear to hold alone. Come with that broken home that still lives inside your weary bones. Come at me with the fire that burns on your tongue. Come at me with the anger that is hung unashamedly from your fuck the world expression. Come and unpack that box of mine that is stamped with the red fragile sign, share all that is real and all that is confined within it. I want to live it. I promise to handle it with care. Come and bear all those wounds that are unhealed. There is no shame in revealing those characters that you have kept hidden, those parts of yourself that you have forbidden the world from seeing. Those parts of yourself that you have forbidden yourself from seeing. It is freeing to come as you are, my dear. Come at me with it all. Come at me with the times you got it wrong. I know you hold on strong to the ideals of what you think this world wants you to be, what you think this world considers to be right, but all I want is for you to be you in all your light and all your darkness. I want to see you for who you really are. Come with all that hardness. Do not be ashamed of the pain that still shakes you. Do not feel you have to fake it through another day. It is not a sign of weakness. Come and embrace who you are, my dear. There is courage here in how you model these shattered shards. You are a reminder that the calm comes only with the storm. You are a reminder that there is no existent norm amidst the mess of humanity. It is merely an illusion to serve the crowds. Come at me proud in your refreshing reality. Come as you are, my dear. Come and spend this day with me, just as you are. Two more, please. This one's pretty self-explanatory, so I might just get into it. It will not go away with prayer. It will not go away with prayer. This darkness is not a punishment for all of my sins. This namaz will not bring the moon to my starless sky. It will not bring back the twinkle to my vacant eyes. I do not feel more alive by reciting verses of the Quran. They leave my lips with a monotonous numb. A numb that is hung from every word that slips from my tongue these days. These days, no matter how hard I pray, the effort of brushing teeth resembles the peak of Mount Manjani beckoning my limp feet. These days, no matter how hard I pray, this duvet wraps me up in togs of tiredness, a comforting heaviness that never disappears. When I kneel in submission, pressing forehead to floor, I am only sure of a hope that this ground opens up and swallows me and Jar Namaz in it. Blanket has become my only refuge from the endless squawking, the endless talking of nothingness. You tell me that the heat of this depression is the curse of Shaitan. You tell me that I am swallowing his harm by swallowing this medicine. You tell me that the sound of the azan will offer me more calm than any pill ever will. Yet still, these voices are so loud, louder than my unwavering will to seek solace in prayer. Maybe God's will is that I seek help elsewhere. Maybe God's will is that I seek help elsewhere, as well as in him, for he is everywhere. So this is the last one. Thank you for listening. I actually wrote this when I was trying to catch a tan, and it is about my culture, my identity, and my mental health. So, my skin is returning home to itself. A wealth of honey chocolate tones wrap themselves around the pale white bones which fail to define me. The sun tenderly kisses each limb back to its colour of origin. Pakistan pours from the pores of me. This beautiful brown reflects the sound of my mother's Urdu lullabies. It reflects the cries from the thirsty streets of Karachi, where my father's wild feet gathered pace as a child, as he was chased by wild shopkeepers for stealing. The revealing of this brown comes with a healing that I have been longing to feel. For I have not been real with myself. My mental health has suffered as a result of me concealing the culture that centres my being. I have resisted the patriarchal traditions. I could not envision myself as a traditional Pakistani wife. But the colour of my life holds more than those stereotypical browns. My crown is made of shades that cannot be easily defined. It carries white jewels of the crescent, moon and star, with a backdrop of green that can be seen gleaming from afar. And there are even splashes of red, white and blue, for my brown cannot resist a dash of British too. I will no longer be confined by the stereotypes of my culture. Instead, it frees me. I cannot be me without being wonderfully Pakistani.
excellent. So no, thank you very much for that. It was very moving. And explore some of the themes that we're going to pick up on later as well. So now we have our section where we're going to show you it's about a 7-minute video. And this video is a compilation of different clips from the people who want to share their experiences with mental health through film. So just going to put it on. Give it a
My name is, I'm known as Tanya or I'm known as Munira, depending on different circles. I don't mind either.
I always say, hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a Sufi singer, a songwriter. First and foremost, I'm a mother.
My name's Foluke Taylor. I'm in my 40s. I used to be a Hindu. I embraced Islam 25 years ago.
I'm Sharifa Energy. I'm a spoken word poet. I'm a performance poet.
Being a black girl in the 80s from a working class family who didn't know at the time I was dyslexic, just thought I was stupid. My teachers called me stupid. I thought I wasn't intelligent.
But then when my dad died, because he was the love of my life, it never even crossed my mind that I was depressed. I didn't.
I was beaten up by my family members. Given an ultimatum, get out of the house, give up the faith, new faith.
About 8 years ago, I moved to London for university.
I couldn't tolerate myself. The sight of me, the smell of me, the sound of me, like every aspect of me made me sick.
His death made me realize, actually, it accentuated my depression. And then he also became my healer. The music started because of him.
And being a male, when it comes to issues of domestic violence, people don't really care about you. People sometimes think you're making it up. People sometimes think, you must have brought it upon yourself. In reality, you think to yourself, well, you didn't.
And I was having to reshape and really find myself.
Even in the second experience of domestic violence in the marriage, I'd actually put out sometimes pleas of help on my Facebook, but people weren't responding. People told me afterwards, yeah, we saw it, but they weren't responding.
But I think really it's just the experiences of people. So for me, podcasting, it's been a huge thing.
I used the music as my medium to help me. Even now, every time I'm stressed out or I'm feeling the blues, I just pick up the guitar.
And something that I would do back then, I would just put on a videotape of Tarawih prayers that were happening in Mecca, and I would just watch it. I'd just sit there and watch it. The videotape was about 3 hours long, but whilst I was there by myself, I just put it on 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. I would just keep watching it, and that in itself kind of gave me a bit of a boost.
Martial arts is really a great tool of allowing your body to allow and release through your physical body.
More so, I read a lot of books. I even find a lot of Christian ministers really inspirational. I find Sufism, just the whole aspect of making dhikr, is a form of meditation. Definitely, I found meditation has helped me. So therapy really helped me in bringing attention to myself and question, okay, so how do I feel in this instance? Why do I feel like this? To even question how people see you and question people's narratives of you, which allows you to put things into perspective and why did they say that? Why do they think I'm that?
I did take out professional specialist domestic violence counselling sessions. And because I was getting flashbacks, etc., to do with my marriage, and you slept with around about 2 or 3 pillows at the same time, but now I'm just about getting onto one as well.
I was referred after like seeing the fire, so I needed therapy. But at the same time, I feel like this opened up, the doors of therapy opened up a lot for me, because then I was starting to take more responsibility for myself or how I look after my mental health. And then you just evolve, like, so you're moving forward from a place of reflection.
Therapy's been invaluable. It's remarkable. We all need therapy. We all should do therapy. The logical part of me says, you're not good enough, you know? Deep down, somewhere inside of me, a rumbling, a whisper, something saying, you're pretty dope, you know?
Having inherited a cultural background is giving space to each other, giving space, allowing space to think. And I've given that space to my children.
It's given me more resilience, that if there is something that's happened, I won't give up until it's been resolved. And resolved is to my liking, not to others.
This really helped me to just become more present. You know, are we gonna allow the fact that we live in London and it's grey outside, are we gonna allow that to impact us every day?
Time passes. This is just a moment in time. And sometimes, like, we may go through things through cycles. We may feel down, and then we feel better, feel better, feel better, feel down. Feel better, feel better, feel better, feel down. But it's just a moment. It is going to pass. It's not going to last forever. I've always dreamed of creative things. I've always seen the world in terms of colors, you know? I see beauty in so many things. So I see a world of beauty and compassion.
When my daughters look up to me, and when they call on me, when they ask for my advice, when they have achieved, and I tell you, they have achieved. They are achieving wonderful women. And there is happiness there. I am really a proud mother.
At the moment, it's just allowing my creativity to flourish without putting myself into any box as such. Like, I just want to grow as a creative.
How do I see myself in the future? Married, living some form of peaceful life.
So they're just like clips of longer videos that Will has shot, and all the longer videos are going to go up on the website. So you can find all the written testimonials and the videos up there. But all of the different stories, they touch on various different themes and topics and different kinds of mental health challenges. So do take a look. So yeah, great. So now we're going to move on to the next part of the event. So just to give you a bit of an overview, we're going to have 2 musical performances and then we'll have a 5-minute break because it's a lot of listening. So next up we have Sanah Ahsan, who is a singer and a songwriter from Manchester, and she kindly contributed to the video series and has been very open about her mental health challenges, and her music is very much inspired by that to some extent. So I welcome Sanah Ahsan on. Thank you.
So basically I was going to stand up, but now I think I'm just going to cower away and sit down. So the song that I'm going to sing is I Am Mine, and basically I actually wanted to come and move to London to study in the textile industry, but Mum had other plans. So basically it's incredible that you can share a story in 3.5-4 minutes, and this is I Am Mine. I hope you can hear down there, can you? Yeah? Okay.
One summer day, and
rural farm towards the village that was not mine. That was not mine. An arranged promise not mine. A deranged promise not mine. Why did you do it? In my heart and soul, I was a city girl, a London city girl from Manchester, but the reality was not mine. Reality was not mine. In my heart and soul, I was a city girl, a London city girl from Manchester. Reality was not mine. Reality was not mine. An arranged promise not mine. A deranged promise not mine. Why did you do it? No. अपने मुझे उधर क्यों छोड़ा? अपने मुझे उधर क्यों छोड़ा? वो मेरा मुल्क नहीं था. Decade gone by, lost my sanity, but the land that I was born in set me free. Finally I was mine. Finally I was mine. Oh, this village girl, this Manchester girl, singing in London City. Finally I am mine. Finally I am mine. 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 Oh, I am mine. I am mine. I am mine. I am mine. I am
We're going to have a performance and then we're going to move to the panel discussion, which is going to be some questions to the panel and then a Q&A, and then we'll wrap up. So we're only probably for another hour. I realise it's a little warm in here. Shall I open some doors? Yeah, I'll do that. Okay, give me a signal when you're ready. Yeah? So this is Rukeia. She's a singer-songwriter from London, and she is amazing. Like, genuinely. And thank you very much for coming. She's going to do it without a mic like Sarah, so thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Hi. My name is Rukeia. I'm freaking out slightly because of no microphone, so please bear with me. I'm going to be doing one song real quick. It's called We Dance, and I hope you enjoy it, okay? Situations, heavy complications, we still made it to a destination, to the waterfalls of desperation, the fire of our confusion, the wind to the solution, twirling us around and around in resolution. Oh, blessed are we. Oh, together we dance, we dance, we dance. We dance, oh, we dance, we dance, oh, oh, yeah. I never thought I'd meet someone without as many fears as me, holding me with my flaws and insecurities, matching in ways never heard of. Oh, it's unheard of, it's unspoken of, never dreamt of. Oh, blessed are we. Oh, together we dance, we dance, we dance, we dance, oh, we dance, we dance, oh, yeah. So wrap me in all your love, wrap me in all your love. 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 Ooh, wrap me in all your love. Wrap me in all your love. Oh, Instagram on the Rukeia official and on the Rukeia. on Facebook. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the
And I'm Sarah the Sufi.
Thank you very much. Rukeia, that was beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for doing it about the mic as well. I just want to apologise, thank you, as well. The panellists also won't have a mic, so if anyone's hard of hearing, I apologise because we just couldn't get mics. Like I said, no funding, DIY team, that's how it happens. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the panel. So this should last about 45 to 50 minutes. And what I really want to do is get in a good discussion with the panellists and have a lively Q&A, so get involved, please. So could I have Dr. Gurpreet Kaur, Foluke Taylor, aka Auntie, Ayesha, Aslam and Sanah Ahsan to join me just over here on the right, please. I'm going to shout as loud as I can. If you can't hear me, just like do that and I'll shout more. And I'd encourage everyone to do the same. So, Dr. Gurpreet Kaur, here on my left, is a clinical psychologist who works both in the NHS and in private practice to support people from all walks of life to access talking therapy. She herself is a Sikh and has recently started to focus on working with the Sikh community to raise awareness and understanding of mental health issues. To my left here is Foluke Taylor, counsellor, psychotherapist and writer with a background in social work and education. She is currently pursuing research on creative writing as a therapeutic practice and is studying her MSc in creative writing for therapeutic practices at the Metanoia Institute. To my right is Ayesha Aslam. She is the founder and director of Sakoon Counselling services. I have used them, they're brilliant. She is a clinical supervisor, BACP accredited integrative psychotherapist, psychologist and Islamic counsellor. Ayesha set up Sakoon to address a need in the mental health community, which was to have access to professional counselling services that would not compromise people's faith. And lastly, but is Sanah Ahsan. Sanah Ahsan, she is a trainee clinical psychologist, spoken word poet and activist. She is currently researching the current demographics of clinical psychologists to see if they meet the needs of the diverse populations they serve. Great. So what I did is I asked each panellist to prepare a minute worth of comments to start off the discussion. And then what's going to follow that, once everyone has made a comment, is that I'm going to ask two questions. And yes, we'll come to those. No more about that. So could I ask Dr. Gurpreet to go first, if that's quite all right, to start with your remarks?
I think it's more than a minute. So.
A minute or two, take the time.
So thanks for inviting me. I think it's a real privilege to be here today. I think I've been invited as kind of my role as a mental health professional, probably also myself as a practicing Sikh. My experience of mental health started way before those identities came along. So I was a teenager when my brother actually started showing signs that were quite distressing, quite scary, and he eventually got diagnosed with psychosis way down the line. That was quite a difficult time because it was a real eye-opener actually, because prior to that we'd been a family that was coping very well, we had our structure, we had a routine, things were fairly predictable. When mental illness came into my family, I can honestly say it was like my life had turned upside down. I was a teenager and I hadn't got a clue what was happening. We tried to understand what was going on, and I guess on one hand we had kind of our community telling us that it was things like he'd been spoilt, or it was jadoo dona, so black magic, or nazar, evil eye, these kind of ways of helping us understand. None of it was particularly helpful. On the other side we had mental health professionals, we had medics, police, we had nurses, support workers, and I can honestly say not one of them really sat down and spent time talking to us about services, mental health pathways, diagnoses, what all of these things mean. We were completely alien to all of this. We went along to one support room and we felt like aliens. It was just all very mystical. We didn't really feel like we had an identity. We didn't belong there, basically. There were a lot of power imbalances. There was a lack of understanding. No one really helped us to access any kind of psychological support from my family, myself. It was very, very difficult. So I feel like I've got a real good experience myself of what it is like to be on the receiving end of all of these experiences. I really want to say, that was a bad experience for us as a family. But unfortunately now, in my role as a mental health professional, I have seen that actually this is a common experience for many, many families, and it's really distressing that further down the line, this many years, it's still happening. I think within the Sikh community, so I'm kind of, talking from my perspective, now that I understand all these things, I'm going to say that there's a lot of undiagnosed depression, anxiety, perinatal distress, trauma, self-harm, eating disorders, all of these things are huge, and we're not talking about it as a Sikh community. We're just not doing a very good job at that at the moment. There's actually been, I don't know if you've seen it, but in the BBC there was a report about Punjabi men and alcohol use, so that's a really big thing as well in our community. And what's been happening recently as well in the last few years, there's been a real kind of spike in the rate of suicides committed by Punjabi men. So what's happening within the community is that we've been trying to keep it hidden, and kind of it's a taboo subject, you can't talk about it, but it's bursting at seams, and it's just not going to stay hidden anymore. So as a result of that, we have people like myself, we have loads of other people in our community, someone's in the audience right now as well, who are doing things, working on grassroots projects. So we're not waiting to be told by organisations, what to do or how to help, we're basically trying to do it ourselves. So I think I'm here today because I was contacted by Seek Your Mind. It's an organisation that I work alongside who's helping to promote resources and awareness of mental health difficulties. But I myself also am just working on creating awareness, so very similar to what you guys are doing. I'm working on creating topics and videos and uploading them onto Facebook and a website called Gurpreet and YouTube. And it's basically me talking as a mental health professional about depression, all these things we've mentioned, mental health diagnoses, but also getting people with the experiences themselves talking about their experience from a Sikh perspective. So these videos are hopefully going to be released soon, and there's many other initiatives happening within the Sikh community. But I have to say I'm completely humbled by the Muslim community and the amount of resources that you've got out there. If you Google Muslim mental health versus Sikh mental health, you've got a lot more going on. So I'm going to really be interested to hear a lot about you guys, and also happy to think about working collaboratively and learn from you.
Thank you very much. Gurpreet, that was amazing. Thank you. So move on to Foluke Taylor.
Yeah, actually you said 2 minutes introduction.
Yes.
So I didn't prepare that either. Because I think I was really touched. I've been really touched by some of the sharing and the poetry and the singing, and really about the vulnerability. And I think the reason I didn't prepare anything was almost I knew that if I prepared something, I would kind of sit behind it, if you like. And what I'm interested in is creative writing for therapeutic purposes, and it's really all about responding in the moment. It's terrifying to respond in the moment here. I think I was thinking about why was I invited? Why did you invite me? And I got here and I thought, oh, you invited me to represent the older generation. I get it now.
No, certainly not.
But I think it was, there were a number of reasons. I think I'm a parent, so the invitation actually came through my daughter. So that's one of the reasons I'm here. I've got 5 adult children who have taught me a lot. And one of the things they taught me really fairly early on was that I couldn't protect them from the mental health stressor that is racism. Not really. And so we took kind of a very drastic decision to just leave. We left the country and spent 10 years somewhere else and came back. And when we came back, there were many things that had changed. It was a bit like what's the film? The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy's house gets kind of caught up in a tornado and then it lands somewhere. So when I came back, we live in Brixton, I felt like that I'd landed in this strange land. It looked like one way 10 years ago, and then it looked completely different. But what didn't change, and hasn't changed really, is racism. It's got a slightly different wardrobe, it looks slightly different, but it operates in the same way, it causes the same kind of stress. And now I think a lot about, you could be disheartened by that. You could think, well, we've made all these efforts. I was reading James Baldwin this week, a piece that he wrote in 1965, and I thought, well, you could read that. It reads today exactly. He's on point, totally on point. There's nothing that's dated about it. And you could get really overwhelmed by that fact. But I think as well as the fight, and there's always a place for fighting, resistance as a fight, there's also recognising survival as resistance, surviving and thriving. And so what I'm interested in are the stories of survival. So even more than, well, how can we survive? How do we? And how have we? Because if we tell those stories, they're really important. If I work within a narrative framework, which means to think about your life as a whole number of stories, multi-story. And if you think of yourself as the hero or heroine, the protagonist of your own story, then kind of issues related to mental health come as challenges to you in your story. But you are not broken. That's why I accepted. I was really happy for the invitation, because when I saw the title, it really spoke to that idea of, well, the broken is a part of the story, but it's not you. It's a part of your story. So I think I'm here to respond and to have conversations. I'm hoping that the Q&A is a conversation. I'm good at conversations. I'm not so good at giving presentations. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. No, thank you. That was amazing. And off the cuff, wow. I wouldn't have done that. Wow. Fantastic. So we'll move over to Ayesha, Aslam. So if you could just remarks.
Assalamu alaikum and hi to everybody. Likewise, I haven't done too much of a preparation either. So I just wanted to keep it quite open. Whatever anybody's thoughts are, any questions that you have, I'm more than happy to try and address it. Just to tell you a little bit more about myself. So thank you for having me, first of all, and thank you for the introduction. I set up Sakoon in 2006, and at that time I noticed that there was no professional service for the Muslim community. I initially started off using mainstream models and techniques, and luckily enough I was approached by a lot of Muslim women. When I started to use them approaches, I noticed that that wasn't sufficient enough. That wasn't the approach that they needed. It was effective, but it wasn't as effective as it could be. And this is when I decided to set up Sakoon, devise my own Sakoon model. And alhamdulillah, it was initially myself, and now we've got a team of 10 therapists. We work in Manchester, London and Birmingham. We work worldwide, thanks to modern technology. Sometimes it can be good, via Skype and other means as well. And we work with individuals, we work with couples, we work with families. So we do a lot of systemic work, because it's not just about the individual in the room. It's a lot about the families. It's a lot about the relationships that they're having. So we do work in that sort of multifaceted way. I also offer supervision, so I do provide my sort of way of how I work, the knowledge that I have, and pass it on to other therapists or other healthcare professionals as well. I deliver a lot of training within communities, and we also have accredited counselling courses that we offer. So if anybody was interested in counselling and looking at it from a sort of spiritual perspective as well, then please do get in touch. I do have our leaflets. I'm not going to go too much into the service. I'm not here to advertise us. But again, it was a really lovely topic, because we come across various types of clients from all different sort of backgrounds, from different cultures, people who are Muslims from different Muslim backgrounds. We also work with non-Muslims. I've worked with the Sikh community. I've worked with non-Muslims as well. I've worked with reverts. I've worked with different cultures who are couples as well, and it's just all the vast differences that come up and the difficulties that come up, not just to do with the sort of the youth, but also the intergenerational gap and what's going on there. How can we bridge that gap with the communication, helping within getting that sort of right understanding between our parents and between the children as well. So we do a lot of work in regards to that within the community, but also within the sessions that I have with clients. So I'm going to just keep it open for anybody who's got any questions, and feel free to ask me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayesha. So we'll move on to Sanah.
Hi. So, similarly, I kind of hadn't really thought this through, and also Jav, like, proper last minute asked me to do this, so I'm just going to put it out there. So, I think what you were saying, Filipe, about the importance of vulnerability and kind of prepping, being a bit of a guard, really like connected with me just now. So I'm going to just try and just freestyle it a bit. So I shared some poetry earlier on, and I think that maybe captures some of my personal experiences with mental health. So I have had my own mental health issues and kind of been in and out of services from quite a young age. And I think that probably drove me very much so to do what I'm doing, which is now training as a clinical psychologist. And I think one of the things personally for me along the way was I struggled to see myself in the people that I was working with, and definitely at times felt misunderstood, particularly around my faith and my culture. I think it was a difficult thing to really convey. So that I think that's kind of what I want to bring today in some of my personal experiences, but also now kind of finally getting onto clinical psychology, which if anyone knows, which I know a couple of my friends are here who are on the course with me, is long to get there. It's incredibly like you have to commit to the journey, and finally like being here, I'm suddenly very aware of the very dominant white demographic within the profession. So it's very white middle class female, over 80% white middle class female. So my research at the moment is trying to deconstruct that identity a bit. So I'm trying to interview white middle class female psychologists on how they experience that identity, and how they see themselves in the context of working with people that are different to them. So I think that's a bit about
Well, thank you very much. I think all your experiences will lend themselves well to the questions, which I will ask. I just wanted all your thoughts, and you're free to kind of jump in as you like. The first question is, what does healing the self look like? So you're all in some ways practitioners in the field. What does healing look like of the self when it is linked to external structures of domination? So that might be white supremacy, that might be obviously racism, patriarchy, heteronormativity. How does therapy address those things within the client and therapist dynamic? So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts.
I have a thought.
Please.
And it's really to do with trauma. If you kind of look at how trauma is worked with primarily, the step one is to make sure the trauma's over. Make sure it's that dangerous thing, that attack, that thing, that it's finished and the person is safe. But in the context of the experience of people of colour, of course, the trauma is never over. It's unfolding. In fact, I'm reading a book at the moment that's called Living in the Wake, and she talks about, can you not hear me? Shout, okay. I'm talking about trauma really not being over. That's living in the afterlife of traumatic experiences. Example, racism. Example, you gave 9/11. They are not over. That afterlife continues. So how do you work with the trauma that is ongoing? And in a way, you then have to take a different approach to, I guess, some of what is usually done with trauma. And as a therapist, what I think is one of my tasks is to offer up the contradictory, paradoxical, completely impossible, conflictual place that we're in. Yeah, it's pretty rubbish, isn't it? You're told all we want is for you to be happy. You're told we live in a meritocracy. If you work hard enough, you're going to make it. And is that true? Yeah. So, and that as a, managing that is a difficult psychological process. And as therapists, and I think, in my opinion, you have to be quite courageous and quite robust to be able to do this. And I think the issue with a lot of white therapists and psychologists is that work isn't in the curriculum. How do they get robust enough to do that? That's a hard ask. You're going to just lay it out there like that. But I think in order that people don't have to live with that conflict internally, which I think is damaging, we need to be very honest in our therapeutic relationship. So that would be my kind of thought, if you like. It's about saying the unspeakable and being honest.
No, I was just going to say, I think, because you're touching on this idea of conflict and managing conflict, and I think we're coming at it as well with this whole system that's telling us how to be as therapists. And I'm thinking at the moment of training as a clinical psychologist. I think, there's definitely like Eurocentric models being shoved down our throat constantly. And it's us kind of trying to manage, actually, does this feel right within the context where I'm working with someone who doesn't necessarily connect with CBT, for example, and can't really get their head around it. And it's kind of that constant negotiation between what we're told to do and what feels right. And I think particularly in the process of training, where you're seeking, you're still in that place of seeking knowledge, that's quite a difficult conflict to manage. But trying to constantly keep that person at the forefront of your mind and consider their culture and consider their needs and their faith systems within a training system that doesn't do that. To be honest with you, like in our training, we're not really equipped to think about spirituality in the way that I feel like is so necessary, or to think about working in different contexts and different cultures, and to bring in community and bring in this idea of community healing and working with families. It's not, I don't feel that my training is really offering me that. It's more through my experiences and my own reading and that kind of thing that I'm getting a better sense of that. So yeah, it's that kind of thing.
I agree, it's kind of like a tick box, isn't it? These courses, they have their criteria that they need to. Sorry, it's a tick box, I was saying. It's like they have their criteria that they need to meet in terms of what they're teaching trainees, but until you marry that up with your personal experience, it's not really going to be very meaningful for a client. I think a lot of the journey for therapists, I know with clinical psychologists, we don't necessarily have to go through therapy. With counselling psychologists, you do have to go through your own therapy, don't you? So it's very much a process of reflection, internal reflection that needs to happen yourself. You have to make that change happen in order for you to provide an effective service for the different ethnic groups that you're seeing. But I think us coming from our own backgrounds anyway, we're going to be doing that. We're bringing a wealth of experience and knowledge to the people that we're seeing.
And can I add that what you remind me of is that you're in a number of stories. There's a tension, isn't there? Because you're training, so you're wanting to get through something and pass something at the same time as you can't bring your full story to that training. So you've kind of got to live these different stories in different ways. And I know we're fabulous, but that's hard to do. And I think what we need to pay attention to is how we support ourselves to do that. So I don't know what support groups or how you tap into other systems in which you can bring your full self. But I think it's fragmented, which is a stress. It's a stress to our mental health. So while you are training, and while that is what you said is true, the curriculum is this, you have to support your other curriculum somehow. Support yourself.
Just to add as well, really have this very quiet voice. Just give me something just to tell me.
Sorry.
But just to add that for myself and for many therapists as well, is that I don't use just one approach that fits for all people. So when a client comes into my room, it's really about looking at what would work for that client rather than what I feel would be appropriate for that person. And it's ultimately, at the end of the day, we are, we can empower ourselves. We do have the resources, we do have the strengths, but you just need that little bit of support from a therapist just to help you to feel that sort of resilience, the struggles that you're going through, to look at it from a different perspective. And that's where the sort of narratives and looking at what you've gone through in a different perspective. So just to give an example, so we've talked about trauma, but what about abuse? If you've been through abuse, and there will be certain scenarios that you may come across where a daughter is told, well, if your husband is beating you up, you have to stay in that marriage, because that is what we're told to do. That is what our beliefs are. Is that the belief? Is that a belief system, or is that a cultural concept? And is this a ritual and a tradition that we have to go through? So it's really about helping a client to explore these sorts of concepts and these sort of ways of how they've been brought up, and these sort of values that they have, and helping them to look at things from another perspective. And this is where the concept of Islam, where I bring in spirituality, is really helpful, because it doesn't have to be Islam, it can also be what is spirituality for an individual, and incorporating that. So looking at it not just from the psychological side or a physical side, but also spiritually. And when you connect with someone from a spiritual perspective, it really helps them to motivate themselves to be able to address the issue. I've had a client who did not talk about abuse for 30 years until her daughter was at the age when she was actually sexually abused. That was by her uncle, by her cousin, by multiple different number of people in her family. And she felt she could never talk about it. Why? Because the culture says that you are to blame. You are, you kind of, the honour of the family will be affected, and our reputation will be going down the system. So we do have this connotation that you were talking about, that everything has to be behind closed doors. You sweep it under the carpet. But Islam doesn't talk about these concepts, right? So this is where we have to talk about the distinction between culture and the distinction between your faith and what is your spirituality, and how do you want to live your life, and having that confidence to be able to empower yourself, to be able to address all these stigmas and these taboos and these issues that we have. Like you mentioned as well, the sort of societal norms that we have. We have to dress the certain image, we've got to look, we have to do things a certain way, we've got to live the sort of materialistic lifestyle. Well, do we? Or do we not? If we're different, what does that mean? I remember another client who came to me, and it was just really sad. She said to me that she's never had a sexual relationship. She's 25, and people question her and say, is there something wrong with you? And I just said to her, it's a gift that you've been able to refrain yourself from not being able to have a sexual relationship. And she wanted to save herself for her husband. And again, it's different for different people. But she was torn by the fact that she's not been able to talk about this, because she sees it as a concept of shame, because it's seen as unacceptable by society. People are now questioning her and thinking, has she got a sexual issue? So again, it's what society promotes and what that individual wants, but there's that huge struggle. And this is where the concept of healing, having a therapist, someone that can give you that sort of guidance, go along with you on that journey to help you to empower yourself, is really, really powerful. So I can't emphasize that enough.
Great. I think that leads us nicely on to the second question, hope you can hear me, which is, what does healing mean? Do we view it as a process which happens between two fixed points, i.e. a beginning and then an end where the healing finishes? Or should we look at healing as ongoing? What does healing mean within the community? So what does it mean outside of a therapeutic space, i.e. a client and a therapist's relationship? I don't know if you have any thoughts around that at all.
Again, I think for myself, everyone has their own journey, and you're always going to be going through different tests and different trials in life. So and again, it's about being realistic, that life is not just the sort of Cinderella story, you live happily ever after. But it's about recognizing that you can get the tools, you can have certain ways of how you can deal with certain scenarios, knowing how you can be in control of certain situations. And that's what I feel is really powerful to help someone in their journey. So not giving them this perspective of, okay, everything's fine now, just go and you'll be fine. It's not that. It's really about helping them to know that you will have your struggles in life. We don't know what life is to come, but you have got the tools to be able to help yourself. There are certain ways that you can deal with situations. This isn't the sort of the end and that's it. Does that make sense? So some people kind of get so caught up in the depression, or they then lead into sort of eating disorders, or they go into escapism, especially when it comes to trauma. People who've gone through really severe issues, and they don't have that necessarily that support. And this is where the concept of families and communities can play a huge part to help the person or to disable a person as well. And it can create a huge amount of conflict for an individual. So I would say it's ongoing.
I think that there's something in as well, like this idea of healing and recovery being like something that you're seeking kind of as an outcome or end goal of you're going to reach this place where everything's okay, you know. And actually that I think shifting the narrative of it being okay to suffer and that being something that you can live with, and having some self-compassion and self-acceptance with that is really important. And where that lies, I guess, when you're talking about kind of healing, whose responsibility is that? I think there's so many levels to it. We're living in a society and a narrative that's around us, which is constantly saying that it's not okay to suffer. You know, like we have to constantly put this facade on of surviving kind of thing, and I think shifting that wherever that's coming from, whether that's this increase in social media narratives of images of norms of how, you know, we should be or should be presenting, whether it shifts there or kind of within our families and people that are close to us. It's difficult to kind of locate it, but I think it's thinking about these things systemically.
One of the things which I think is interesting is I was talking to Filipe when I came to your house, friends, is that if the healing, if the pain isn't just coming from myself and it's coming from outside of myself, then how can the healing just be with me, right? So the pain is coming from structural forces and stereotypical things and all sorts of oppressions. So that idea interests me.
So I, as I said, think of it in terms of stories. Now, what kind of story would it be? I didn't feel so good, and then I felt better at the end. That's not really a story, is it? It's a bit dull, and it's not how we go. If we think of you know, any story you read, the healing will be, I don't know, might be slaying a dragon at the end. But you can't kind of just slay the dragon and it's over. You'll have another chapter. You'll have another incarnation. And everybody has their own tools, don't they? It's not every character has to look for a sword. Somebody might have to go and look for a magic cup, or go and seek a wise person to talk to, you know, climb a mountain. So if you can kind of position yourself, think of your healing as this ongoing kind of journey, if you like, to find what works for you. I think you were talking in your poetry about prayer, or reciting, I think it was reciting that, yet that I'm not feeling that. But other people talked, and somebody on the video talked, I thought something about watching this 3-hour video of people praying. And I thought, well, so what is some person's sword, if you like, doesn't belong to another person. So for me, healing is finding what's yours. Finding what's yours, finding your path. I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you if I hadn't experienced a lot of distress in my own life, because what would I know? You know, there's something I might, at the time, I might have wished for it to be gone from me. But actually now I can see, oh, that's a part of a journey. And as I can think of it now, I can think of it as a positive thing. So I think healing is this kind of process of reauthoring, if you like, including, as you said, so not all about you, it's you in your environment. The other thing that would be boring is a story, although there are stories that are written like this, just one guy talking, you know, from beginning to end. But mostly stories are about the context you're in, you in your environment, in your world, whatever it is, your version of it. So I think you're right, we need to connect and not see it as an individual process.
Can I just add, because something just came in my mind, just about when it's a struggle from the outside in. Just to give you an example, I've got an article on our website, it's called Muslims Can Never Be Depressed. So a lot of Muslims in the audience might connect with me. So we did have this sort of connotation that Muslims can never be depressed. If you read the Quran, that is it, you'll be healed. And this idea of depression is not allowed, and it's, you know, that just means that you're not close to your God, Allah. But I'm trying to say God as well. So it's that concept. And this particular client that I worked with, he wrote an article for us, and he talked a little bit about his experiences. He was a practicing Muslim, he was in Saudi Arabia studying Arabic studies. His scholars and his sheikhs, the imams, were actually promoting and saying Muslims cannot be depressed, and the Quran is just their source of healing. And again, he was suffering from depression, and to hear that just made him feel even more depressed, thinking, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Why am I going through all these issues when all my really big role models and leaders are telling me that you can't be depressed? But again, it's this misconception of what depression is. And when we think about depression from a mental health perspective, we recognize that it's a psychological issue. It has nothing to do with your faith. But this is where a lot of our communities do not understand the concept of mental health. And this is something I talk about time and time again within communities. Do you know what mental health is? Recently, I've just done some videos for Ramadan and fasting. And again, we have this sort of culture sometimes where people say, are you fasting? I think a lot of people will probably connect with that. And if you say no, they will probably be curious, why are you not fasting? And if it's something that goes on the checklist, okay, you're on your period or you might be pregnant, then it's valid and it's accepted. But if you say no, it might be because I'm depressed or it might be because of something else, it would be perceived as, oh, but you go to hell, or it's a sin, and do you not know how heavy that is on your scales for the hereafter? This doesn't happen all the time, but these are some of the cases that I have come across. Eating disorders. Now just imagine someone who suffers from anorexia or bulimia. Do they have this negative association with eating? What do you think fasting is going to do? It's going to promote and it's going to enhance the eating disorder. It's not actually going to be helping that individual. And I had a case of a client who almost died because of the pressure of the community telling her she should be fasting. And her doctor, her GP told her, you're not in the right place of mind to be able to do that. You're in the process of your treatment. You need to carry on with that. But she did the fasting because of the pressure of the community. She didn't want to feel judged. And as a result, she relapsed. So this is something that I'm kind of working on in terms of helping the community to understand that it's not about being judgmental. And it's not about thinking you're doing the right thing, that you're saying the right things, it's your responsibility. But it's really about talking in terms of the gentleness of, we don't know what the person's gone through, we don't know their background and their history and the struggles that they go through. And some people don't even want to tell you as well.
And isn't that essentially the crux of therapy, isn't it? It's providing people with a space. It's basic Nigerian skills, being able to help people to feel safe within the therapeutic environment, to be able to give them that understanding. That's so important, isn't it, outside of the therapeutic environment, to be able to connect with people so that people feel that actually they're just understood and it's okay to just say, I feel like crap today, and just to have someone hear that and be with them on their journey. Really, really important.
I mean, I can go on for ages.
I just want to say one more thing, because you're talking about therapy, and I think we're talking about healing our communities, but there's something also about who is getting into that space, because there's definitely, I don't know, I'm sure everyone can kind of connect to this, but how we're actually assessing people that are considered suitable for psychology and suitable for therapy. And I feel like we're not necessarily serving our communities like in a just way, because at the moment, I mean, this is maybe a bit slightly controversial thing, but I feel like we discuss this a lot in my training, but how we perceive someone who is psychologically minded is often influenced by their ethnicity, their cultural background. And there's a lot of young black men in the psychosis service I'm working in that are being missed because they're not seen as able to engage in the therapy.
I think the opposite can happen as well, where you get people who come into therapy and people from BME groups that it might take a little bit longer to socialise to psychology and to therapy to actually understand what is this thing that I'm doing and just to get their head around it. Actually, if they go to an IAP service, that's 6 class sessions, bang, you're done and you need to go out. It's not long enough to be able to deal with actually their need, and there needs to be more time spent on actually just allowing them to understand what the process is about, and that doesn't happen. And so a lot of people, I think from our groups who go into therapy, they actually just leave straight away because they just don't feel as though someone's understanding them, and their time isn't spent to long enough with them to be able to explain the process in a way that it makes sense to them.
But there's also sorry, because I know we're really short time, but there's also something about actually we're in systems that are racist. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like that's the reality of it. So people are coming in at points, like as being sectioned and to come in, that's the point of access for them. Because it's racism. Exactly. And I think the reality of it is how are we supposed to make an effective change for these people when they're coming in at their late 30s or 40s, with being sectioned and then being re-traumatized because we're doing really fucked up shit basically to them. We're creating more harm within the systems that we're working in. And and then coming at, in these powerful positions, trying to come in, then from being the harmers to then reframing ourselves as helpers. It's like, it's really complex stuff. But yeah, I think there's lots to talk about with that, but I knew that we should.
So what I'm going to do now is open up to the floor. I hope there's many questions. So it'd be really great to get some questions centred around some of the things that we've discussed. Feel free. Do ask a question or make a comment, but keep it fairly short, So yeah, the floor is open. Please shout also. Sorry for the lack of mic.
Thank you for the really wonderful event from the panel. Thank you for everything you said. I just have a question about I shout to the audience. I've got a question about doctors. So I do really brief so people who don't know about mental health care practice. So doctors who go to mental health and psychiatrists, they're the ones who diagnose. If you go to the NHS, they're the ones who treat people, they're the ones who section. The Royal College of Psychiatrists has done big surveys about the ethnicities of the doctors going in, and most of them are female, most of them are white, until you get higher up, and then most of it's white men. But there's a really big study that's come from King's recently showing that black men who are sectioned are more likely to be given sedatives whilst they're being sectioned, even though there's not really a clinical need. Does one of the panel have any advice for interacting with doctors, specifically in the mental health field, or if they've got ways, or if they know if there's doctors who are working in ways that are sort of intersectional?
Wow, that's a big question right there. I think. Sorry,
I was just wondering in terms of sectioning itself, or doctors generally.
Sorry, as in intersectionality, so doctors who are working intersectionally. But sorry, I was talking. So obviously, doctors are the ones who have to section people. It's not.
Yeah,
the wrong
I don't have kind of names to give you of psychiatrists who work in a way that might take into account intersectionality or racism, although there are texts that talk about, I guess psychiatry's got very racist roots, basically. I was once at a conference years ago, probably like 20 years ago, and we were talking about that psychiatry came study of, so they have diseases, and I really can't remember the name, I cast it out of my mind forever, but it was a disease that was the desire of a slave to run away. And it was called something like, I don't know, dracophobia or some ridiculousness. So this is the root of psychiatry. What a ridiculous thing. And I remember saying, I was working for a mental health project, and I remember saying, so it seems to me that what we're looking for, this was my question from the floor, is a psychiatrist who doesn't believe in psychiatry. And one of the psychiatrists laughed. He was an Asian psychiatrist who'd written this book about and was talking about this. But the other psychiatrist was really angry that I said that. And even came to talk to me in the break about how basically I shouldn't have said that. But what it makes me think in terms of, and having in my family had to kind of advocate really on behalf of people with psychiatrists, I think it's about what we would call backative. Who are you taking with you? Who are you taking with you? Because particularly if you're unwell, your voice is small. Maybe you're not in a place to be advocating for yourself. You need to be really thinking about that. And this is where family is involved or friends are involved. Because what I find is it's often about articulation. You have to be on it. They call it cultural capital. You have to know what it is you want to say and how to say it. And often when you're not feeling great, you're not going to know that. So I think it's about supporting each other in that circumstance.
It is. I think I 100% agree with that. I think it's about informing yourselves, kind of that person, you have to build a network around them. And that network, informing themselves about what their rights are, what their privilege are, what they're able to ask, but also not thinking that they can't ask things. It's very important to think, well, you have every single right. Sorry. Just kind of having that confidence to be able to think, I can ask what I like, I have the right to ask what I like. And it's very important to be able to be confident to do that. It takes a lot of energy, especially when you're dealing with psychiatrists who are at the top of their field and they're very difficult to engage with generally. But you have the right to do it, and I think it's just about developing confidence in how to go forward and try to do that.
There's something though, I feel like what we're talking about is how we equip people to defend against the system. And I'm trying to think about how us, like within that system, work with psychiatrists who are unbelievably ignorant and powerful. Because I mean, I'm already like experiencing this massively at the moment, and I find it really difficult to kind of assert myself with people that are actually being fully racist in the room. And I think as well, this how the system is set up at the moment, which I'm sure you're kind of familiar with, is nurses are predominantly black.
Yeah.
Then you move up and you slowly get, like you said, kind of white middle class females, and then you get white men. And that's just how it kind of is. And feeling that racism in a room where you have nurses just there kind of passively experiencing this racism is so difficult and uncomfortable. And I mean, I'm curious for you guys kind of how you've done it throughout your career, because I'm quite early on in it. And I tried to assert myself through supervision a few times and got shut down. So I'm still, I mean, I hope I don't lose that, like, curiosity, but I'm just wondering how you guys have kind of managed it.
I mean, I don't think you'll lose it. I think you need to safeguard it. I think you need to, you are the biggest asset that we have. Think of it like that. So you need to look after yourself. It's not every single battle you can fight, but of course you can have a voice. Now it's interesting because I met somebody, my friend at Ashford over there, who I haven't seen for probably about, 15 years, a very long time. And because I ran a group for black therapists, we're working in all kinds of different environments, and we'd meet, and that became a kind of source, if you like, a place where you can go, you'll never guess what they said, you'll never guess what happened, and you believe it, because of course you can't say that in your, in your meeting at work, but you have to resource yourself. You're going to have to equip yourself. It doesn't really matter how strong you are, or how strong-minded you are, or how determined you are human. We are human, vulnerable, fragile sometimes, and that system is hard. It's hard to be in. So that's I think of yourself as an asset and think how you're going to protect yourself.
I would like to look at it from another perspective. So there is these situations that are taking place, but there's also hope. There are a lot of people from all different backgrounds that are in the system, that are in the field. And I know a number of doctors who have their own associations, that they're now starting to psychoeducate a lot of the other psychiatrists, other doctors, in regards to cultural practices, in regards to spiritual practices, and starting to get that sort of understanding. So we are aware that NHS was initially set up by a white middle class male, and that was a sort of approach, and that was a sort of way that he would address certain sort of psychological issues and physical issues. And now there is a lot of training that's taken place because there was a lot of misdiagnosis. There were misdiagnoses that you've been sectioned, but it was actually a cultural practice. I did a talk many years ago with a few different other panelists, and one person talked about a cultural practice where they would put seeds outside the door, and a person saw that as there's something wrong with that person, and they would be misdiagnosed. And again, because it had that sort of white middle class sort of approach, that's understandably, that's how they would see it. Again, from an Islamic perspective, if you're reading the Quran, sometimes you might move your head back and forth, right? Again, sometimes some people have been misdiagnosed and they've been sectioned as a result of that. And a lot of clients that I have tend to be very fearful about going and getting a referral or going to see a psychiatrist because of the fear that they will be sectioned, that they're not going to understand their cultural practices. But having been in the system now, I am starting to see the hope, and I'm starting to see the changes, that people are now becoming more open to the idea of different ways of working. So I would say that yes, there is these concepts that are still taking place in regards to the racism and the struggles that people are going through, but there is also hope. There are a lot of people in the fields that are now starting to educate people.
Great. And with that, I might move on to another question. A nice, hopeful end to that question. So does anyone else have any questions? Preferably from this side, I feel. Over here. And please shout.
Yes.
Thank you.
What advice would you give to mothers dealing with mental health issues, but they're afraid to access the services because of social services, basically?
Normalisation of perinatal distress, I think, is the first thing. Can you hear me?
No. Sorry about this. Yeah, you can do, yeah, if you want. You're welcome, or you can shout.
Normalisation, so speaking, talking, finding out yourself, first of all, about perinatal distress and understanding the different forms it can present itself in, and then having conversations with the new mothers about some of the signs and the things that they're experiencing, so they can understand that actually their experience and distress, it's a thing and it's a very common thing, and that not social services don't get involved with every single mother who gets, has that kind of emotional stress. I think there's online counselling now, isn't there, for new mothers, so there's really accessible ways to find different therapies that work for them. I think it's about talking essentially, and understanding where their distress is coming from, and trying to work with it on a very personal level.
Great. I might move on to another question just so we get a broad range of questions in. So, yes. And please also shout it yourself.
Just wondering, because
speak up, sorry.
Sorry. I know, just from my experience, I find that in the community sometimes there's a growing compassion for psychosis, but there's not enough of an understanding around common mental health issues. And because a lot of people they understand when you're talking about psychosis, there's it's going to okay, that's something that's accepted. But when you talk about common mental health issues, anxiety, depression, like we were talking about earlier, I think that's an area that there is not enough understanding. So I'm just wondering what you think about that. And the other thing I was going to ask is, when we talk about cultural practices, even cultural practices has differences within that. So it's not the case as a black is doing that all cultural practices, that everyone from that particular culture behaves in a certain way. There's also a history within that. There's families that have their own individual stories, and sometimes people do say that's cultural practices, but I'm just saying that there's a difference within that as well. Yeah, so just wondering what you think about that.
My initial thought, actually, when you said that, I was kind of shocked because, from my perspective, I've always seen it as psychosis has a lot more stigma with it than the narrative that's around depression and anxiety. Because there's a lot of, I mean, I don't know if you're I'm sure there's conflicting opinions on this in the audience, but I feel like there's a lot of stuff kind of in media around seeing psychosis as the most extreme end, and maybe people finding it hard to connect with some of the experiences around voice hearing and delusions and that kind of thing. Whereas I feel that perhaps the kind of the I don't know if you want to call it a spectrum, I don't know, but the very different experiences like the depression and anxiety, perhaps more people have connected to, and there's a growing narrative around acceptability of that, especially on social media and that kind of thing. So yeah, I guess that's kind of was my initial thought. I kind of had it the other way around. I don't know if you guys feel similar.
Can I just add? My daughter has been diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety. The thing is that she didn't know she had it. She didn't know what it was, what was wrong with her. And that's exactly what happened to me. I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I knew that I was ill. And I dragged myself to the doctor, and he had to do the analysis, and that's when they realised that I was severely depressed and had anxiety. And then I was put on serotonin, whatever it is, I'll give you antidepressants. But then it is a fight with the medical world, and then with yourself as well, because you don't want the serotonin, because they're going to shut down your natural serotonin. And so it's this kind of, first of all, acknowledging that you've got it, or there's something wrong with you, but you have to go, because there's a lot of students here that are second year, third year university students, like my daughter, had no idea, and so you've got to first of all identify that you're ill in the first place, but then really the thing in the middle is the lack of support, because all they're giving you is the diagnosis and the medicine. If you don't go on the medicine, they'll put you off. They literally took me off the list.
That's really worrying.
They took me off the list. They said, if you don't take your medicine, we're going to take you off the list, and they did.
It's very worrying because actually for depression, talking therapy is actually extremely important. If anything, that's the first port of call. So if anybody of you know that anyone who is depressed or you feel depressed yourself or being given medication, question us. You have a right to access talking therapy as the first port of call. That's evidenced by NICE guidelines.
Thank you for that.
I just wanted to come back on something because I had a different experience when I've been through depression in my life, and I actually had the doctor asking me, do you want to go on antidepressants, which I find really troubling after hearing your experience, because how can you almost give the patient a choice when they don't know what they need? I mean, I've been through IAPT a couple of times, and I've had say different forms of CBT which had like variable usefulness. Like I found like counselling was never offered in those services, and then there was a local community service which offered counselling to, I think it was free counselling to Asian women in my area. I was on the waiting list, I was told 6 weeks, 3-4 months later I got a call back, and by that time I decided like I don't need this anymore. But you know, like I think waiting lists can have sorry I'm a bit nervous, but I think waiting lists can have like a really hard impact on people. And I've heard stories from friends and you know like their partners, you know, about almost like IAP. They go through this process and they're referred to IAP, and then they're told that we can't do anything for you because you know your condition is too complex, or it has this characteristic involved which we can't do anything about, which is just really like you know troubling to hear. Because I mean I'm not speaking from like I guess you know like cultural perspective here. I'm speaking more about like problems we have with mental health services across the NHS. But like
thank you for that.
You know it's just,
yeah, can I just add something? So I don't know how relevant it is, but what I'm kind of hearing a lot is about talking, the importance of being able to talk and the importance of having somebody hear you. And of course we know that I, as a therapist, that's how I work, that's what I can offer. But I'm also kind of keen for us all to develop this capacity, if you like, to be able to hear. And I don't think when people kind of say, oh, you should go and pray, or oh, you should fast, or oh, you should do something because they're trying to be unhelpful. I think they do it because they want to help, or because they are frightened, or because they don't know what else to say. Therapists, I think, what we learn to do is to not find answers, to sit with difficult things and hear difficult things without trying to fix them. Doctors, bless doctors, they've got 10-minute consultations. They're there to fix, aren't they? Would you like antidepressants or would you like IAPT? But I think we can all really cultivate ways of responding. And I think we probably should, rather than in kind of, I don't want you to put me out of business, don't get me wrong, rather than insisting on this, oh, you've got to go to a therapist, go and see a counsellor. What about we all try to develop a capacity, to deepen the capacity, to sit with what is difficult and to heal and to respond?
I love that. I think that gets to the heart of the kind of idea of what does it mean as a community to heal. Maybe step one is listening, hearing. Right? I'm going to take literally 2 more questions and then I'm going to wrap up. So let's see. I'm going to go pick because this is just. Okay, I feel like the lady with the yellow bag has had her hand up from like the beginning. So we'll go with you first. Sorry.
Thanks for everyone. Please speak up. Sorry. I'll try. Yes. Just to go back, so I work in the NHS myself, and what you were saying, Sanah, about working within a ward, for instance, where you have already that hierarchy, which is, I work as an assistant psychologist, and being in the middle, how do you cope in a way without it? Because I know that in my instance, when I would raise those issues, saying, oh, you know, maybe that patient, because of the cultural background, this and that, I would be shut down because, or you're too young, you're kind of dismissed in a way, and it's, how do you kind of address this? What's the appropriate way? Because I was shut down so many times, frustratingly quit my job for some different reasons, and I come across the same problems, especially still within the NHS with all the white practitioners, male and female. How do you, I mean, I'm still quite young, I like to think, but it's quite difficult to deal with those conflicts, not just, with the clients saying you want to offer them that support, but they see you, as you said, as a person gives them help, but also dealing with your colleagues. Some of them have got very negative
thoughts about who you think you are. Can I say that I think I was just wanted to acknowledge your generosity actually, in that some of us feel able, I suppose, to kind of to offer advice, explanation. Maybe that's not what that means. Maybe that is what this means. You know, you're kind of translating or interpreting an experience, and I think it's really important. And I think it has a shelf life. Me personally, I am tired of that. So what I do now is, I think there's a lot of research out there, there's a lot of writing out there, there's a lot of people who have said these things. I think, I can't speak for everybody in the room, but I know we've mainly been thinking about this, so we've already studied a certain curriculum, and you're talking to people who haven't studied the curriculum. So it's like you're in like sixth form, and you're trying to talk to people who are basically in, you know, year one, and you're trying to catch them up, and that's hard work. So I think what I do now is I store, literally, if I come across an article and it speaks to this, I go, okay, I'll put that. So if you then ask me, well, what do you mean that patient might be cultural issues? Like, I tell you what, I'll email you all of these things. Have a read and see, because these are academic people. These are people who have studied to be where they are, and they, well, you know, the curriculum's always changing. Put it that way. This is like additional modules. But it's one way of presenting yourself. That's all I'm saying. If you're feeling generous and you've got the energy, go for it. I'm not criticising that. I'm just saying I know I've got no energy.
I'm sorry. I'll let Sanah respond, and then we'll have one more question.
I'll keep it brief because I think fundamentally I'm still learning. Is the truth to that question? Like, I'm still trying to work it out, and I think I've definitely struggled along the way without peer support. And I'm finding actually now, being on the doctorate, I'm learning so much from people around me in the same position. So people of colour who have been through similar experiences, that we can really talk about the shit that we've been through and think together, both having sort of critical minds and come and learn from each other, I guess. But also, I guess, regulating my own stuff through writing, through poetry, through going to supervision when it feels appropriate. But I'm trying to take on definitely this whole approach to conserving my energy and self-preservation and picking my battles a bit more wisely. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I'll just take a question from over here. So the lady at the back there. Yes, and that'll be the final question, because I know it's very hot in here. Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Please shout. Sorry,
I'll try my best. Can everybody hear me? So
I'll repeat the question for those of us.
Okay. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. I mean, you might not have any, which is fine, on kind of counselling and therapy being more accessible, particularly for those with kind of language and communication difficulties. Because we've kind of all spoken a lot today about how it's really useful and how it's, it can be really useful in terms of the healing process. But I wonder what that would look like for somebody who has those like language and communication difficulties, especially thinking about the fact that mental health has a very real and direct impact on people's cognitive abilities, and where language is, the kind of language is a massively heavy cognitive process. So if people's cognitive abilities are being impacted, not necessarily reduced or just different, they're looking different, and just what that means for their ability to then be able to access talking therapies, and whether we need to be doing more to make them more accessible.
I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to try. That was wonderful. I wish I could say that. How can we make talking therapies more accessible for those with speech and language and communication difficulties? So last question, open to the panel.
There are different approaches in therapy, and I think it depends. It depends on who you're talking about, in particular, the particular difficulties. But it's not necessarily just about talking. There are different ways to engage with people. Because essentially, that's the point of therapy. It's about connecting yourself with the person sitting in front of you. And if that's through writing, that's one avenue. If that's through talking, that's another avenue. If that's through play therapy, that's another avenue. It could be drama therapy, it could be art therapy. There are a whole host of different therapies out there, really. And I guess, again, it's just going back to the idea of feeling empowered enough to inform yourself about what is out there and how can you enable that person to access those therapies.
I'll take one final remark from the panel, and then I'll make a close. So does anyone else want to comment?
Just on another side, thinking about it from just a language perspective. So if someone is from a Bengali background or just speaks a completely different language, at Sakoon we have different therapists that speak different languages and different dialects as well. So we do reach the community in that context. And again, we can also connect with the culture, connect with what it is that's important for them also. So there is a sense of awareness that language is key and it is important, especially when you're talking to parents or you're talking to the older generation that need to have that sort of support and that service when it comes to parents and children as well. How do we bridge that gap, which I mentioned earlier? But yes, there does need to be a little bit more in regards to that sort of service being available.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
So you've all been very patient, it's hot in here, some people can't hear, I'm really sorry about that. And we tried our best, like I said, no funding, you know. So I just want to say thank you very much for coming. It's been a really great discussion, I think probably the best bit, I'd say. Thank you for kind of showing interest and coming along. If anyone else wants to contribute to the I Am Not What Is Broken website, either with written contributions or you want us to film you, get in touch with us. I'll put up the slide as people are walking out. I just wanted to pick a few points just to kind of reflect on. I think the idea of community healing is a really interesting one. So as people who are parts of multiple communities, who identify with multiple types of identities, how do we hear people? How do we support people and how do we advocate for people who either want to talk or are trying to access services to help them? Also that there's different types of therapy. I really like what Gurpreet said at the end there about how there could be different types of therapy, drama therapy, play therapy, narrative writing, as Foluke has told us about, that there's not just one model which works. And also one thing that's really come out is that actually from within the internal space of practitioners who are working in the mental health field, there clearly are conversations that are going on, which actually gives me a lot of hope. The fact that people like Sanah, Ayesha, Fuluke and Gurpreet exist, I mean, this is very hopeful. And I just thank you so much for working in the field and advocating for these issues and dealing with them. I mean, wow, literally. I find it hard just going to work. Like, I'm working at university, but like, God, this sounds a lot. So, you know, it gives me a lot of hope. And also, I just think it would be really fantastic if we continue to have these conversations, whether between us, within our communities, within our friendship groups, and hopefully we can do another event at some point. What I will do, any kind of useful resources from any of the panellists or any professionals in the room, Will and I can put them on the support page of the I Am Not What Is Broken website. And thank you very much. That's all from us. Thank you.